I stared at the legal document, the cold official language barely registering. Not her daughter. The words echoed in my head. A cruel, mocking whisper. My father, the man who raised me, the man I thought I knew, was claiming I wasn't his to cut me out of my grandmother's will. How could he? What would you do if your own father denied you? Rain pattered against the window of my small apartment, mirroring the storm brewing inside me. The city lights of Neo-Chicago blurred outside, a glittering distraction from the ugly truth unfolding. I picked up my phone, the smooth glass cold against my trembling fingers. First, I had to talk to him. I tapped his contact, hovering over the call button. What could I even say? Hey, Dad. Just calling to confirm you're disowning me. Sarcasm, my constant companion in times of stress. Emma? His voice was strained, hesitant. Dad, I said, trying to keep the anger from my voice. The will. I saw it. Silence. A long, heavy silence that spoke volumes. It's complicated, Emma. Complicated? You're saying I'm not your daughter. How is that complicated? My voice cracked. I can't explain right now. Just trust me. It's for the best. For the best? For who, Dad? You? I hung up. The dial tone a mocking buzz in my ear. Trust him? After this? My grandmother, Nana Rose, had always been my rock. She'd understood me in a way my parents never could. She'd left a significant portion of her estate to me, earmarked for my design business. My father, who had always struggled financially, would inherit the rest. Now, he was claiming I wasn't family to get everything. What kind of person does that? The air inside was thick with dust and memories. I wandered through the rooms, running my fingers over the familiar furniture. Everything felt different, tainted. I remembered Nana Rose telling me stories about my mother, Sarah. Sarah had died when I was young, a tragic accident, they said. My father never talked about her. A closed book I learned not to open. Maybe the key to all this lay in my mother's past. I went to the attic, a dusty, forgotten space. Boxes overflowed with old photographs, letters, and trinkets. I started sifting through them, my heart pounding with a mixture of hope and dread. Hours passed. I found pictures of my mother as a young woman, laughing and carefree. Photos of my parents' wedding, my father looking genuinely happy. But nothing that explained his current actions. Nothing about me not being his daughter. Then, tucked away in a small wooden box, I found it. A letter, addressed to my mother, postmarked weeks before I was born. The return address was unfamiliar. I unfolded it carefully, the paper brittle with age. The letter was from a doctor confirming a DNA test. The test revealed that my mother was not Sarah Miller. She was someone else, someone named Amelia Hayes. My blood ran cold. My mother wasn't who I thought she was. And if my mother wasn't who she thought she was, what did that mean for me? Was this why my father was denying me? Was he trying to protect a secret? I grabbed my phone and immediately did a search for Amelia Hayes. Several articles popped up, mostly news reports from decades ago. Amelia Hayes, a young woman who had disappeared without a trace. Her family had never given up hope of finding her. I clicked on an article with a grainy black and white photo. The woman in the picture. It was my mother. Or rather, the woman I thought was my mother. But it wasn't Sarah Miller. The resemblance was uncanny, but the differences were subtle. A slightly different nose, a different set to her jaw. Sarah Miller was an imposter. But why? And what had happened to the real Amelia Hayes? I stared at the photo, my mind reeling. My entire life, everything I thought I knew, was a lie. I had to find out the truth. Could you live with a lie this big? The librarian, a kind woman with a warm smile, helped me navigate the archived newspaper articles. I spent hours poring over old news clippings, piecing together the puzzle. Amelia Hayes had been a promising artist, living in a nearby town. She had a fiancé, a loving family, and a bright future, Then, one day, she vanished. The police investigation had turned up nothing. No witnesses, no leads, no body. The case had gone cold. Until now. I found an article mentioning Amelia's fiancé, a man named David Carter. He had been heartbroken by her disappearance, cooperating fully with the police investigation. He had even offered a reward for information leading to her whereabouts. I decided to track him down. It was a long shot, but it was the only lead I had. I found his contact information online. He was still living in the same town, running a small antique shop. I drove to the town, a quaint, idyllic place that seemed a world away from the bustling city of Neo-Chicago. I found David Carter's shop, a cozy space filled with dusty treasures. He was an older man now, his face etched with wrinkles and lines, but his eyes still held a spark of sadness. I introduced myself, explaining that I was researching Amelia Hayes's disappearance. He looked at me, his eyes widening in surprise. Amelia? After. He listened intently, his face growing pale. Sarah Miller, he said, his voice trembling. I remember her. She moved to town shortly after Amelia disappeared. She looked a lot like her, but different. He told me that Sarah had approached him, offering comfort and support. He had been vulnerable, grieving for Amelia, and she had taken advantage of his pain. They had become close, eventually starting a relationship. I never understood why she was so secretive, he said. She never talked about her past. She always seemed afraid. He showed me old photos of Amelia, smiling and vibrant. He also showed me photos of Sarah. The resemblance was striking, almost uncanny, but there was something off, a darkness in her eyes that Amelia never had. David told me that Sarah had left town a few years after they met, without explanation. He had been devastated. He had never stopped wondering what happened to Amelia, and what Sarah's role had been in her disappearance. He then told me something that made my blood run cold. Amelia had been pregnant when she disappeared. Pregnant. I was a design engineer, working on augmented reality interfaces for the... I wasn't a detective, but this was my life, my identity. I had to keep going. I thanked David for his help and left the shop, my mind racing. Amelia had been pregnant, and Sarah Miller, or whatever her real name was, had taken her place. Did she kill her? Did my father know? I returned to my apartment, the rain still falling outside. I sat down at my computer, determined to uncover the truth. I started researching Sarah Miller, digging deep into online databases, social media archives, anything I could find. It was difficult. Sarah Miller was a ghost, with very little online presence. It was like she had deliberately erased herself from existence. But I kept digging. After hours of searching, I found something. A small, obscure blog post from several years ago, mentioning Sarah Miller. The post was about a local community theater production. Sarah Miller had been involved in the costume design. I clicked on the blog post, hoping for a photo. And there it was, a grainy, low-resolution photo of Sarah Miller standing. I zoomed in on the photo, my heart pounding, and then I saw it. In the background, partially obscured by a curtain, was a familiar face. My father. He looked younger, thinner, but it was him. What was he doing at a community theater production with Sarah Miller? This was getting stranger by the second. I decided to contact the theater. I explained that I was researching a family history and asked if they had any records of Sarah Miller's involvement. The theater director was helpful. She found some old production photos and programs, including one with Sarah Miller's name listed as the costume designer. She also mentioned that Sarah had been very close to one of the actors in the production. The director gave me the actor's contact information. His name was Mark Johnson. He was retired now, living in a small town nearby. I drove to Mark Johnson's house. He was an older man, but he still had a twinkle in his eye. He remembered Sarah Miller well. Sarah was a talented woman, he said. She was also very secretive. She never talked about her past. He told me that Sarah and my father had been very close during the production. They had spent a lot of time together, rehearsing lines, building sets, designing costumes. I always thought there was something going on between them, he said. But they were both married at the time. I never said anything. He then told me something that made my stomach churn. Sarah had confided in him that she was pregnant. Again, was I even related to these people? My father had been having an affair with Sarah Miller, and Sarah Miller had been pregnant. Was I the result of that affair? Was that why my father was denying me? I returned to my apartment, feeling more confused and lost than ever. I didn't know who I was anymore. I didn't know who my parents were. Everything I thought I knew about my life was a lie. I sat down at my computer, determined to find out the truth. I needed to know if I was my father's daughter. I needed to know what happened to Amelia Hayes. I needed to know who Sarah Miller really was. I started digging deeper into my father's past, searching for any connection to Sarah Miller, any clue that would explain his actions. I found something. A hidden folder on his old computer. A folder filled with photos, letters, and documents. The folder was password protected. I tried every password I could think of. My birthday, my mother's name, my grandmother's name. Nothing worked. I knew I needed help. I needed someone who could crack the password, someone who could access the information in that hidden folder. I contacted a cybersecurity expert I knew from a previous project, a woman named Chloe. She was a genius with computers, able to hack into anything. I explained my situation to Chloe, telling her about the hidden folder, the DNA test, my father's claim. She agreed to help. It took her several hours, but Chloe was able to crack the password. The folder was unlocked. I opened the folder, my hands trembling. A photo of Sarah Miller holding a baby with my eyes. I scrolled through the photos, my heart pounding. There were letters too. Letters from Sarah to my father, filled with love and regret. The letters revealed everything. Sarah Miller had been running from something. She had changed her identity, assumed Amelia Hayes' life. She had gotten involved with my father. She had gotten pregnant. She had given birth to me. And my father knew. He had known all along. But why had he kept it a secret? Why was he denying me now? What would you do if you learned your entire family was built on lies? I found a document in the folder, a legal document, a confession written by my father years ago. In the confession, my father admitted that he had helped Sarah Miller cover up her past. He had helped her assume Amelia Hayes' identity. He had helped her disappear. He had done it because he loved her. He had been willing to do anything for her, even commit a crime. But why was he denying me now? Why was he willing to throw away everything he had done to protect Sarah? The answer was in the will, my grandmother's will. My father was desperate for the money. He was willing to do anything to get it, even betray his own daughter. Or so I thought. I kept reading, my eyes scanning the document. A paragraph that made my blood run cold. My father admitted that Sarah Miller had confessed to him years ago that she had killed Amelia Hayes. She had killed her to steal her life. She had killed her to be with my father. She had killed her because she was pregnant. I stared at the confession, my mind reeling. My mother was a murderer. My father was an accomplice. And I was the product of their crime. I closed the folder, my hands shaking. I didn't know what to do. I didn't know who to trust. I needed to talk to my father. I needed to confront him with the truth. I drove to his house, my heart pounding with anger and betrayal. I found him sitting in his living room, staring out the window. He looked up when I entered, his face pale and drawn. He knew. He knew I knew. "Emma," he said, his voice barely a whisper. "I can explain." "Explain what, Dad?" I said, my voice trembling. "Explain how my mother murdered Amelia Hayes? Explain how you helped her cover it up? Explain how you lied to me my entire life?" He hung his head, shame washing over his face. "I did it for you, Emma. I did it to protect you." "Protect me? From what? The truth?" I said. "I would rather know the truth, no matter how painful. than live a lie. He told me everything: how he had met Sarah Miller at the community theater, how he had fallen in love with her, how she had confessed to killing Amelia Hayes. He had been horrified, but he had loved her too much to turn her in. He had helped her cover up the crime, burying Amelia Hayes's body in a remote location. He had lived with the guilt ever since. He had tried to protect me from the truth, but it had always haunted him. He had denied me in the will because he thought it was the right thing to do. He didn't want me to be associated with his crime. He didn't want me to suffer the consequences of his actions. But now I knew the truth, and I had a choice to make. I could turn him in. I could expose his crime. I could avenge Amelia Hayes's death. Or I could protect him. I could keep his secret. I could let him live with his guilt. What would you do? Would you seek revenge, or would you choose forgiveness? I looked at my father, his face etched with pain and regret. I saw the man who had raised me, the man who had loved me, the man who had tried to protect me in his own twisted way. I made my decision. I went to the police. It was the hardest thing I've ever done. Seeing my father arrested, knowing I was responsible for his downfall. The investigation was intense. The police found Amelia Hayes's body where my father had said it was buried. They had enough evidence to charge him with being an accessory after the fact. My father confessed everything. He told them about Sarah Miller, about the murder, about the cover-up. Sarah Miller, who had been living under an assumed name in another state, was also arrested. She was charged with murder. The trial was a media circus. The world watched as the truth about Amelia Hayes's disappearance was. My father and Sarah Miller were both convicted. They were sentenced to life in prison. I testified at the trial. I told the truth, no matter how painful. I spoke about my mother, about my father, about Amelia Hayes. It was difficult, but it was necessary. I had to do it for Amelia. I had to do it for myself. After the trial, I tried to rebuild my life. It wasn't easy. I had lost my parents, my sense of identity. Everything I thought I knew about my life was gone, but I was determined to move forward. I started my design business, using the money I had inherited from Nana Rose. I worked hard, pouring my heart and soul into my creations. I found success. My designs were innovative, unique, and in demand. I built a reputation for myself as a talented and creative designer. I also found love. I met a kind, compassionate man who understood my past and accepted me for who I was. We built a life together, filled with love, laughter, and happiness. I never forgot about Amelia Hayes. I made sure her story was told, that her memory was honored. I established a foundation in her name, supporting young artists and helping families of missing persons. In the end, I chose justice over revenge. I chose truth over lies. I chose to honor the memory of a woman I never knew. It wasn't easy, but it was the right thing to do. And I wouldn't have it any other way. So, what would you have done in my place? Let me know in the comments below. And don't forget to like and subscribe for more stories like this one. Your voice matters. Share your thoughts, and let's discuss the choices we make when faced with impossible situations. Thanks for watching. Remember, sometimes the hardest truths lead to the greatest strength. Even now, years later, the weight of that decision settles heavily on my shoulders sometimes. People often ask if I regret turning my father in. They wonder how I could betray my own family. But what choice did I really have? Could I have lived with the knowledge of what he had done, silently complicit in Amelia's murder? The rain outside has started again, a familiar soundtrack to my late nights. I'm working on a new augmented reality fashion line, layering digital fabrics and patterns over real-world garments. It's a way to escape, to lose myself in creativity. My phone buzzed on the desk beside me. It was Liam, my partner. "Still working," the message read, followed by a heart emoji. "Just finishing up," I texted back. Thinking of ordering some takeout. "Want anything?" He knew me too well. "Pizza sounds amazing," I replied. Liam was a constant source of support, a reminder that I deserved happiness. After he arrived with the pizza, we curled up on the couch, watching some ridiculous reality show. It was a welcome distraction from the darkness that still lurked in the corners of my mind. Later that week, I received an unexpected letter. It was postmarked from the state penitentiary. My heart skipped a beat. It was from my father. I hesitated, the envelope heavy in my hand. Should I open it? Could I face him again, even through his words? Curiosity, or perhaps a morbid sense of obligation, won out. I tore open the envelope and unfolded the letter. His handwriting was shaky, barely legible. He wrote about his remorse, his regret for the choices he had made. He understood why I had turned him in. He said that he deserved his punishment, but he also wanted me to know that he still loved me. He said that he would always be my father, no matter what. The letter ended with a plea for forgiveness. Could I ever forgive him? Could I forgive a man who had enabled a murderer and lied to me for my entire life? I didn't know. I carefully folded the letter and placed it in a drawer. Maybe one day I would have an answer. Right now, I just didn't have the strength. A few weeks later, I was contacted by a woman claiming to be Amelia Hayes' sister, Eleanor. She had been trying to find me for years. Ever since the trial, she wanted to meet me. I was hesitant at first. What could we possibly have to say to each other? But there was also a part of me that was curious, that wanted to connect with Amelia's family. I agreed to meet her at a small cafe near my office. Eleanor was an older woman, her face lined with grief, but her eyes were kind. She told me about Amelia, about her dreams, her hopes, her fears. She showed me photos of Amelia as a child, laughing and playing. It was strange seeing these images of a woman I had never met, a woman whose identity had been stolen by my own mother. Eleanor thanked me for bringing Amelia's killer to justice. She said that she had never given up hope of finding her sister, and that she was grateful for my courage. She told me that she didn't blame me for what my parents had done. She knew that I was just as much a victim as Amelia. We talked for hours, sharing stories and memories. It was cathartic, healing. By the end of the meeting, I felt a connection with Eleanor, a bond forged by tragedy. We promised to stay in touch. Meeting Eleanor helped me to understand Amelia Hayes, not just as a victim, but as a person with a life, a family, a future that had been stolen from her.